usually think they were so obsessed by death. But if you look into the tombs through the whole Egyptian history, what you see are depictions of life. So in a way, it would be better to say the ancient Egyptians were obsessed by life and its continuation beyond death. The museum was able to acquire this Tomb of Perneb in 1913 from the Egyptian government. Then the museum sent its crew, which was also the excavation crew, with Albert Lisco as the head, to the place. They took a lot of photographs. We have a whole series of these marvelous photographs of that time. They removed slowly the debris around the tomb, and block by block, the tomb was taken apart. And then it came to New York, and it took 3 years till 1916 to reconstruct it in the museum, in the place it is now. From its opening, it became quite a New York monument. There are some cartoons just after it had opened, where you can see how people immediately reacted to this ancient monument here. The unique point about Perneb is the amount of architecture that the museum was able to acquire with the tomb chapel. You have to realize what we have is a lot of architecture, but it is mainly the front half of this original mastaba, as we call it. So in a way, the Metropolitan is the only place to see the architecture of an Old Kingdom tomb outside Egypt. If we want to go back into Perneb's time, we have really to go more than 4,000 years back, about 2,350, 30 BC. So we are here in what we call the Old Kingdom, the time of the great pyramid builders. Perneb was an official who functioned in the presence of the pharaoh.
Perneb's essential function was to be the king's dresser, the king's valet, if you want. The king was the focal point of Egyptian society. He was the link between the world of people and the world of the gods. The king, unlike every other human being, was also clothed with the symbols of kingship, crowns and scepters and so forth. It was somebody's job to take care of these instruments, this regalia, and to actually put them on the king in the morning. In Perneb's time, that was Perneb.
So that gives him quite a high standing in the hierarchy.
The ancient Egyptians expended more energy and more money on creating tombs like Perneb's than they did on their own houses while they were alive.
You have to realize that in ancient Egypt, you started making your tomb as soon as you were able to. So in a way like today, one starts one pension fund or something, they started their tomb.
Very few ancient Egyptians could afford a tomb like Perneb's.
So let us imagine the Old Kingdom. Saqqara was the main royal and non-royal cemetery for the capital of Egypt, which during the Old Kingdom and later was a place called Memphis by the Greeks. The tomb of Perneb was situated to the north of the great step pyramid of King Djoser in that huge cemetery of Saqqara. It was like entering into another village with the streets and the monuments, but now you would be in the city of the dead. Underneath, there's the burial chamber with a shaft dug deep into the ground. The tomb of Perneb is called a mastaba, a massive box, you could say, of limestone, which has inclined sides. The mastaba with its courtyard and chapel and rooms remained the accessible part of the tomb where the family and friends could come to perform the rites and bring offerings. In the middle of the mastaba superstructure, there was the shaft that cut deep into the bedrock and led finally into the burial chamber. When the mummification was done, the mummy was lowered through the shaft into the burial chamber and deposited in the massive stone sarcophagus. here in the burial chamber were the 4 canopic jars at the foot of the sarcophagus, jars that contain the organs that were removed from the mummy during mummification, miniature vessels that were deposited during the burial are not real vessels. They are magical substitutes for large vessels and their contents. After all these rituals were completed, the priests and workers climbed back up the shaft using little cut-out niches, like a staircase. The shaft was then filled with rubble, and finally the burial chamber was sealed for eternity.